moving. I will just start with a couple of reminders for those of you who can join us tonight. We're going to have our first ever actual, both the first ever virtual and first ever actual virtual movie night. So if you're free at 6 p.m., remember to join us, make some popcorn, get some snacks, bring in your family. We'll be watching The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And depending how it goes, we might start doing this weekly, particularly now that I finally installed the AC unit in the window, so my office is not a little oven, so I can actually be here more than 2 hours at a time. That said, I think by now most of your summer assignments should be done. We have been, Gabby and I have begun to review them, and we'll be sending you feedback over email or putting the feedback as comments on your entries on ePortfolio. Then the last part is we have, next week we're gonna have a career coach from Propel Career to talk to us about informational interviews. Lauren Solano, who's been, was my career coach when I was in need of one. And then the week after, we're going to begin organizing what you guys requested, which was the networking event with PRISM alumni. I have so far gotten 2 yeses and 1 maybe. And I'm trying to cover as many fields as possible. So from MDs, it's not gonna be just graduate students, but remember that it's easier to get graduate students because they're still in school. The people with actual jobs work. So sometimes it's harder to get them to commit a couple of hours. And we also have just got a confirmation from our keynote speaker for the last week, which is going to be Dr. Jahaira Sierra Sastre, who, well, it depends on what happens with NASA, but she's training to become the first Puerto Rican woman astronaut. She's very excited to talk to you guys. And that said, what I want you guys to start, I just found out from our grant administrator that we have good news from the Research Foundation of CUNY that they're gonna need you to finish the MOOCs for us to be able to reimburse you. So as soon as you finish your MOOCs classes, I need you to send me either the email telling me that you finished, a certificate, proof that you have finished your MOOC, and I will refer you to the grant manager so we can reimburse you for those costs. What we're gonna be able to do is reimburse you up to $150 of whatever expenses you had on those classes during the summer. That said, today we're going to be talking with various professionals in science on diverse fields in science, and this is how it's gonna go. I'm gonna introduce them and have a few questions for them. And as you guys have questions, feel free to send it to us via the chat function. And at around 2:30, we're going to split you into smaller groups, which is one of our panelists, so you can have a more personal conversation with them as a small group. So without further ado, our panelists, and in alphabetical order, first one is Dr. Geraldine Van der Auwera. Dr. Van der Auwera completed her education at the Catholic University of Louvain in her native Belgium, followed by a postdoc at Harvard Medical School. After some time at MIT as a visiting scientist and also as a consultant in the biotechnology industry, she joined the Broad Institute, where she is now the Director of Outreach and Communications for the Data Science and Data Engineering Group. Next panelist is Dr. Kwame Osei-Sarfo. He attended the Xavier University of Louisiana and completed his doctorate at NYU Sackler Institute of Graduate Biomedical Sciences. He completed a postdoc fellowship at Weill Cornell and worked as a research scientist in a biotherapeutic company while serving as an adjunct professor at CUNY's City Tech and also at John Jay College, in case any of you actually took classes with him. He is now the director of the Bridge to the Ph.D. program in STEM at Columbia University's Fu Foundation School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. The next panelist is Dr. Lindsey Silva. She graduated from UC Irvine before continuing her doctoral studies at Harvard Medical School. She then pursued a postdoctoral, which I just looking at her LinkedIn, I just realized we were at Harvard Medical School, you, Geraldine, and I at the same time, and we didn't I didn't see you while we were there. She then pursued a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Southern California before beginning her career in the pharmaceutical industry at Grifols. She is now a senior manager for the microbiology global quality control technology at GATK. Finally, we have Dr. Teresa Ramirez. She began her professional journey at Cal State University, Dominguez Hills, with a bachelor's degree in general biology. After she graduated from Cal State, she participated at an NSI postdoc program at the NIH before pursuing her doctoral studies at Brown University. She obtained a doctorate degree in molecular pharmacology and physiology there, while she established a SACNAS chapter, which is the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. She then pursued a postdoc at the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. After that, she participated in the Genetics and Education Fellowship for the American Society of Human Genetics and the National Human of Genome Research Institute, and is currently the program manager for member communities at the American Physiological Society, which is known as APS. Welcome to all four of you. So that we go in order, what we'll do, we'll keep it to that order for the questions. Don't feel that you have to answer. If you don't feel that you don't want to answer that question, don't feel like you have to. In particular, so ask a few questions, and students, if you have any other questions that you would like to share for me to ask, send them via the chat, or just tell me via the chat and I will tell you when, and you can turn on your mics. So the first question is, can you describe what is your job, your day, and can you share with us, what do you do on your day-to-day life?
So I'm starting? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be with you. Yeah, so my job, for the most part, day to day, is that I work with a number of teams that are responsible for, sorry, I just had somebody try to call me. So I work with a number of teams that are developing software and infrastructure for supporting researchers. So we do things like develop analysis algorithms, and we have an online cloud-based portal for big data analysis that we provide to the academic community. And much of what I do is working with the various teams that are developing this software and infrastructure to make sure that that what we're developing is helpful to researchers. And then I also work with the marketing teams and so on to make researchers aware that we have all these available software and services, and we teach them how to use them. So we have a team that does workshops and trainings and stuff like that. We have people who write blog posts, who engage with researchers at conferences and online. And so my job is mainly to kind of coordinate and direct how we do that, and how we make sure that we're serving the scientific community. So that's it in a nutshell. Any question? Yeah.
Sure, I didn't know if we're going in a particular order. So hello, everyone. It's nice to be with you. I am the director of the Bursary Ph.D. program at Columbia School of Engineering. And pretty much my day-to-day is more or less, I'll put it very generally, putting out fires from all aspects of some of our students' activities. But more specifically, since this is a postbaccalaureate program that's supposed to help underrepresented groups gain access to graduate programs, I plan most of the professional and academic development workshops and seminars. In addition to that, I also run all of the hiring and onboarding of our incoming Bridge Scholars. So that's actually what I've been doing a lot of over the past couple of weeks. And in addition to those two things, I work with various departments and PIs/advisors to make sure the Bridge Scholars are in a nurturing, thriving environment at Columbia University. And on the other aspect of my job with the kind of day-to-day, I work with Columbia School of Engineering for their diversity recruiting efforts to kind of bring groups from underrepresented backgrounds into our graduate programs at Columbia in Engineering.
Lindsey?
So I think I'm next. And I am a manager in global QC microbiology. So my day-to-day job is really understanding what are the technologies that are needed for real-time release testing of our large molecule biologic portfolio, and also be forward-thinking in what are the needs for cell and gene therapy now that this portfolio is rapidly growing. So for any microbiologist or virologist out there, the traditional pharmacopoeia test methods for sterility, mycoplasma, endotoxin, virus testing, they're great and reliable, but these turnaround times can be up to 28 days. And what we like to think of is patients are waiting, and the traditional test methods aren't really meeting the needs of our patients. And especially in the time of COVID-19, where we have clinical trials to look at efficacy for treating COVID-19 patients, we can't wait around for the results in a lab. So what's been really exciting is we have these rapid micro test methods that we're implementing into good manufacturing practices, so that rather than waiting for a 14-day sterility test, we can get the results down in 7 days. And previously, I also supported the viral safety of large molecule biologics and plasma products. So even though I'm very much trained as a molecular virologist, I get to apply my virology skill set and making sure that these biologic medicines are safe for the patients. Because in theory, any biologic that's derived from a living organism, such as cells for monoclonal antibody production, or from plasma patients for therapeutic proteins, theoretically, you can have a virus contamination. So we really try to make sure that we have a holistic approach in upstream for all of the virus and mycoplasma and microbial testing to make sure that there's nothing in your starting material. And that is additional safety measure, making sure that the downstream manufacturing process is capable of removing and inactivating any type of adventitious virus, in addition to additional test methods of your drug substance and drug product for sterility and endotoxin. And lastly, we're always thinking about how do we engage with health authorities. So there's a real push on adherence to the 3R principle for animal welfare. And a big topic is how do we move away from testing in animals? It's not really value added, and Europe is paving the way and finding in vitro alternatives for a lot of these test methods. So one exciting thing is looking at recombinant factor C for endotoxin testing. So thanks.
Well, thank you for having me, and hello everyone. My day-to-day job involves working with a variety of different committees throughout APS, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Women in Physiology Committee, Trainee Advisory Committee, and Physiologists in Industry. I'm using my science in a different way and doing a lot more of that outreach and communicating science opportunities in physiology to the community. So that's why I'm a program manager at member communities, as well as to our trainees. We run various fellowships, so I can talk a little bit more about that, where some of your students at GATK can probably apply to. There's also different scholarships, like travel awards to attend different conferences. So I'm involved with that, but also I have the honor of working with like the different departments within my organization, where we're constantly thinking like, how can we better serve our communities? And how can we better provide these different types of resources in physiology that they can take advantage of? So there's a lot of communication going on, a lot of meetings, but also it's fun because I'm able to use my science differently from what I learned in the lab to doing something more administrative. So there's different possible opportunities to use science.
Excellent. Thank you very much all for coming. And okay, so then one of the topics that we have been exploring this summer in our summer program is how careers are nonlinear, and that in some instances, your career aspirations can change as you learn more about yourself and also about your job and the profession that you follow, or as you develop new skills and learn about new interests. Thinking back to when you were in the same stage as our students are right now, which range between sophomores and recent grads of college, what was your career aspiration there? If it has changed since, did it happen naturally? Is it something that you progressively moved into that? Or was it something that you concertedly tried, okay, I want to shift gears in my career and move to a different area or a different set of interests where I get to use different skills?
Yeah, so my trajectory has definitely been nonlinear. It didn't go according to plan, but in a good way. So my original plan was the very traditional like tenure track scientific career that I had been sort of, I don't know if it was self-brainwashing or just a general, it's kind of part of the atmosphere in academia that's once you go it's grad school and you do a PhD and then you have to be a postdoc and then, do the whole tenure track thing. And if you deviate from that, there's feelings of inadequacy and all that stuff. I'm sure everybody can kind of relate to that in some way. I felt very much like that, and I had bought into the idea that it was tenure track or bust. But when I came to the US for my postdoc, a lot of things kind of changed for me. And I would say it was over the course of my postdoc, it was a mix of things. One was a little bit of disenchantment with the system and kind of growing awareness that's, and this is not to knock academic careers and like the traditional career, but there is a little bit of, there are a number of systemic problems that lead to people being perhaps undervalued, perhaps treated in a way that is not conducive to feeling nurtured and flourishing. And I certainly felt like getting into the jaws of the system was a little intimidating, and I was starting to question whether that was really what I wanted to do. And at the same time, I ran into the very practical problem that eventually my postdoc scholarship started running out. So my funding was running out. My visa was running out because I'm originally from Belgium in Europe. And I had met someone and I wanted to stay in the US. And I wanted to stay on the East Coast in the Boston area, but the atmosphere there is very competitive, and I'm not afraid of a bit of hard work, but there's like degrees, right? I wanted to have a life. And so I kind of ran into this reckoning that what I wanted, what I needed to have wasn't really in lining with what were my prospects. And anyway, long story short, I did a little bit of consulting, a little bit of contract work, and had the opportunity to interview for a job at the Broad Institute. I also interviewed at a few commercial companies, ended up interviewing at the Broad, which is a nonprofit research institute, and got this opportunity to get a job that was definitely out of my comfort zone. It was basically doing tech support for academic software package. So they were developing these tools, the algorithms, and they needed somebody who could talk to the scientists and who could also talk to the software developers. And I had kind of cultivated some software skills. All this to say, it was a big leap because I was basically abandoning the career track that I had chosen. And it felt very scary at the time, and my parents thought I was throwing it all away. But it worked out really, really well because it opened up some opportunities I hadn't thought about previously. And I'm now in a job position and situation that feels a lot more secure. I feel like I have more employment security and financial security than I might have had otherwise. And so while that wasn't planned and that involved a lot of self-doubt and a bit of a leap of faith, it was absolutely the best decision I could have made in that situation. I think yeah.
So maybe I can go next. I was very lucky in that I went to UCI, got into all of these great programs for underrepresented students in STEM. And so by the time I was getting ready to graduate, I really felt that I wanted to be an academic professor. I loved science, so I was going to join the lab, work at UCI. That was my career trajectory, and the way to do that was by going to grad school. And I think what was kind of shocking is representation matters, and if you can see yourself represented in science, you believe that you can do it. And grad school was a little bit of kind of sink or swim mode. It's so important to have community and support, and it was a struggle, but I graduated with my PhD. And I think at the time, the assumption was that if you do an academic postdoc, you're gonna study for a couple more years, but that will be relevant experience to get you that job. And so what was really a shock is that even though I was able to get a funding, a T32 grant, I could already see that academia wasn't really the space where I wanted to be. I was tired of working 80-hour work weeks for a salary that was really barely a living wage if you're in Los Angeles. And just so burnt out. And over the years, it's gotten even more competitive for funding for getting that K-99 to get your professorship and start your lab. So at the time of my postdoc, I was really trying to figure out, what do I want to do? What do I like? What don't I like? And I quickly realized that I love science, but I didn't want to be in the bench all the time. I needed work-life balance. And I was very fortunate that a manager was willing to take a chance on me. So the real shocking thing is you don't realize how overqualified or underqualified you are until you actually start the job search process. And even though I had a Harvard PhD, I had an academic postdoc, all this virology training, because I never had any biotech experience, I was just getting rejection after rejection after rejection. And I was very fortunate that I got the job at Grifols. And I think what I didn't realize at the time is even though my CV may look like a lot of other people, because I could speak Spanish, even though my accent's pretty terrible, that gave me an advantage because it's a Spanish company and I was able to know the science, and I learned the quality and regulatory aspects on the job. And it was just getting that one foot in the door that really helped me realize that I love viral safety for biologics. This combines the best of both worlds, still loving the science, seeing how it applies to how we deliver our medicines, how we do right for our patients. And the other thing that's great is that I get to pay it forward and give back to my community. And that's part of the reason why when I got to Genentech with a fellow colleague, Maria Muchas, we started the SOCNAS Professional Chapter. So that way we could make sure that if students were thinking about biotech or were interested, that they could get intern experience while they were qualified to apply for these programs. So that way they wouldn't run into the risk that I was in, of where I know I don't want to do academia, but what else do you do with the PhD and how do you find a job?
I'll go next. So I am straight out of Compton, California, where science was not really emphasized in school. So as a young girl, I thought I wanted to become a pediatrician. That was my dream. And I never had in mind that I was going to become a scientist. But thankfully, with mentors that I've had and people who believed in me, sort of guided me in that route, which my interest started to grow each time by participating in summer research programs and also being opened about new opportunities, because you never know where life is going to take you. Perhaps we have a dream or a goal that we want to pursue, but something else is waiting for us. So at the end, after finishing my post-bac program, that's why I did a post-bac program, because once I graduated from college, I thought, I'm going to go to med school, but I don't feel ready. I'm going to take a year off and let me do a post-bac. When I took the post-bac program at the National Cancer Institute in Frederick, Maryland, I really learned that I liked the research, and that exposure really opened my eyes. And then another great thing that I learned while I was there was that, hey, everything was paid for if you went for a PhD. So I thought, wow, like I'm learning science, I'm loving it, and everything paid for? Wonderful, because I don't owe anything as an undergrad, thankfully from scholarships that helped me pay for that. And then for grad school, I thought, well, I don't want to owe any money, but yet I want to become a doctor. So I still became a doctor, not a medical doctor, but a scientist. And life has been wonderful because my path hasn't been a straight path. It's been very curvy with different opportunities that I never imagined that this Compton girl would experience. So one of my advice to you is to be open to the opportunities. And perhaps if things don't happen the way you want them to happen, it's for a reason, because something greater is waiting for you. So just be open. And here I am now. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up, but I know that eventually I'm going to move back to California. And one of my dreams and goals is to pursue a career in academia, but mostly administratively, like the president of Cal State Dominguez Hills or the chancellor of all the Cal State systems. That is my dream. Thank you.
Okay, so back in the day when I was a college student, I kind of was debating between two career paths, if you will, to go to medical school or go to graduate school, since, you know, as a biology major, you kind of think those are your two options. And after doing a couple of summer programs, one summer program was geared more towards pre-med, another two summer programs were actually summer research programs. I realized that I actually enjoyed doing the research or conducting the research more than actually practicing medicine, even though I didn't technically practice medicine during one of those summer programs. So that led me to, you know, obviously go to graduate school. And most of the time during graduate school, I just kind of thought you just had the one of two options with the PhD, either become a professor or become a scientific researcher at, you know, a major research site. So going through that process, you know, taking classes, doing research, I kind of felt like I was going to either stay in academia or go into industry. But on the side, while I was, you know, going through my graduate school career as well as my postdoc career, I did a lot of outreach, and necessarily wasn't just scientific outreach. So I did a lot of volunteer work. And so that kind of complemented, you know, doing good for society, even though I also thought, you know, conducting research in cancer would also do good for society. So then the time came towards the end of my postdoc career where I was trying to look for academic positions, and it just honestly wasn't happening. I don't know if it's just, you know, the current statistics are like 1 out of 11 postdocs will get a tenure track position. So it just wasn't panning out for me. So I decided to then, okay, well, I have this scientific background, why not just go into industry? So that's how I ended up at Immune for a few years. And that was going well, but I still kind of wanted to be in education, higher education in some aspect. So honestly, what I did, because I knew some people that was doing kind of the work I'm doing now, but I didn't know, like, how do you actually move from being a scientist to becoming an administrator unless you've already been a professor? So I just kind of used LinkedIn and just cold network. So basically, I looked for people who had similar title positions that I wanted with PhDs in the biomedical sciences. And by having these conversations with folks, I learned, like, okay, these are the things you need to emphasize in your resume and your CV on your interviews or when you're actually reaching out to people for these particular jobs. So, I mean, I did, want to actually go into becoming a professor, but that didn't pan out. So, it's kind of, I just moved a little bit to the right or to the left, like in terms of what I call, you know, academia adjacent. And so far, things have been well. I've been in this position for about 3 years right now. And all I would just like to say in terms of a piece of advice is definitely keep your options open and definitely keep your networks open. So a lot of the previous positions, introductions to people about certain jobs were formed because I knew people from my grad school years or from my postdoc years. So even Edgardo, he recommended me for the adjunct position that I had at John Jay. So definitely keep those lines of communication open no matter what stage of a career that you're in now. And even right now, as the director of this post-bac program, I still reach out to people on LinkedIn through various panel sessions just to see like what other things I can do, one, for my career, and two, for my actual program that I direct.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question, it's about something else that we have been doing this summer. Something else we've been exploring is the role of personal values, which we are defining as what we find important in our work life to feel fulfilled as a person outside of work. So I already sent you guys the list of values that we've been exploring. So from the list that we sent you, which one would you say is the one that you personally need to be fulfilled, that you really need to be part of your job to be happy there? And is there any of them that you feel that you can live without?
That's a really hard question because all of those values, I feel like, contribute to some extent, and I'm sure that's part of the conversation. I would say that the two big things that, because I couldn't narrow it down to one, but the two really big things are really, I need to feel like I'm doing something worthwhile. Like I don't want to just get a big paycheck. I want to do something that's worthwhile. It's corny, but for humanity. Like I want to feel like at the end of my life, I can say like I did something that helped people. So that's kind of well, I guess that's the one that would come, that is perhaps most important. But that being said, I would say a close second is feeling like I have security and stability. And it's funny because it's something that wasn't as important to me when I was younger, when I was in my 20s. As a single person who was completely obsessed about my chosen topic of research, I could have been like a monk-like person and just lived off of bread and water, maybe bread and beer, and just did it for the love of science. But as I grew a little older, met someone, started a family, all of that stuff, I would say I realized how important it is. Especially, growing up, my parents supported me. When I was in college, my parents supported me. But once I was out on my own, I realized that it is important to have a life that gives you stability, that you're going to be okay. And so helping humanity first, but making sure you can do it in a way that you can live a life, I think is important and fair.
I second that. I feel that giving back to the community is something very important to me. If I don't have that opportunity, I feel that I'm not fulfilled. And it's something that I learned at a very young age from my parents, the ability to be able to help someone, to share any resources. And that's sort of what I'm doing now, working at APS and doing a little bit of that outreach. But I've done it from a long time, not thinking that that was something that was going to be part of my job. And so now it's more formal, but also having a work-life balance. I feel that as a student, I always thought, oh, I'm only here for 5 years, or oh, I'm only here for 4 years. And not really taking advantage of that moment. And one thing I've learned now as I'm a little bit more older is that live every moment, because that minute doesn't come back. And so you have to make that balance, because if you enjoy, like for me, for instance, I love photography. I have time for photography. Oh, I love going salsa dancing. I go salsa dancing, making it part of your life, because that time doesn't come back. So make the best of any opportunity.
Okay, I'll go next. So I would say one of the most important things was, I guess, following after the two panelists, is the giving back aspect. So that's one of the main reasons why I went into biomedical research, because I thought as a scientist, I would give back to the community. And so I just kind of pivot that in terms of giving back, you know, to humanity, I should say, to actually kind of make it more specific to giving back to the community. Because as a scientist, you know, I kind of thought, yeah, I'm researching this, let's say, protein X, and you know, my discovery may or may not actually significantly contribute to cancer Y. But however, with this position, I know, like, at a day-to-day basis, I've at least done something positive for someone else. And that was one of the major driver reasons that, you know, when I was thinking, you know, this academic life might not work for me, maybe administration will work, because, you know, at the end of the day, you've done something, whether it's just sending a simple email to remind a student to say, hey, did you complete your personal statement, you know, today? We should really try to work on some of your applications for conferences. At the end of the day, it's like, I can actually say I've done X, Y, Z, and I didn't really feel that way as a research scientist. And one other small piece, which, you know, the other two panelists did say, is definitely the work-life balance. Because as a scientist, not saying there's anything wrong with it, you know, you put in so many hours a week, and sometimes you miss out on a lot of small things that, you know, folks in other industries may be able to appreciate. So I would have to say, like, the first week of my job, I was like, wait, I'm off at 6:30? What is this? I must have forgotten to do something. And so based on that work-life experience, I was like, okay, well, between these two things, giving back and having more time for me, for my husband, I think this is, you know, the right path that I'm actually pursuing.
Yeah, I would say for me, job fulfillment is kind of my #1 priority. I have to love what I do. And I think what I'm trying to do is change the dialogue on that. Diversity and inclusion is an activity, and it really should be core to our business. I firmly believe that scientific innovation is driven by a diverse mindset and a culture and inclusion, and that we really need to focus efforts and recognize that how we give back by engaging with talent early in their career and recruiting them as interns is going to pay dividends when we have talent that feels empowered to speak up and bring their voice to the table so that we can continue to stay competitive. Because I think what biotech is realizing, that if we keep hiring from the same schools, the same set of skills, the same people, we're not going to do anything innovative with our pipeline. And that's where we can't just keep talking about what does diversity mean unless we really put it as part of our business, part of our core. And this is what fulfills me, because I get to be in a position where I can do the science, I can bring these diversity and inclusion is more of an less activity and more as like, this is a core initiative. And then also influence not only senior leaders who are on board, but also change the mindsets of middle management who tend to be risk averse, and that it isn't, we need to be better at smart risk taking, not only in the technology, but in how we hire and how we think about talent.
Okay, so then I have one last question, and then we have a couple of questions already from students coming in. So it's very important as a professional to always be, and also as a scientist, to be thinking what is the next step. You can be doing the experiment in front of you is not the goal. It's figuring out what is the experiment that comes next, and what happens if that doesn't work, and what happens if it does work. How does that change my hypothesis? So applying that to professional development, I would like you guys to share with us, if you want, what do you think are you gonna be doing in 10 years? And what are you doing right now to prepare for what might be that next stage?
Wow, 10 years, huh? Probably paying for my kids' college. So I would say the evolution of my career has been right now towards taking on more responsibility within the organization and moving from my early positions where I was doing like tactical implementation of you know, what are we going to do, how are we going to communicate things to researchers and so on, and gradually moving towards a more strategic level of, as an organization, where are we going in 3 years and 5 years and 10 years? How do we set the stage for that? So it's kind of what you're talking about, but at the organization level. And I expect to do that for the next few years, probably. It's very interesting. At some point, though, I actually, my end goal now is evolving towards becoming an author. I have published my first book, which is a textbook style book on genomics in the cloud, if you want to learn about that stuff. It's a book, it's got hands-on exercises. Sorry, I didn't mean this to be an ad or anything, but
go for it. You want to make that plug?
If you're interested in genomics, big data, interested in cloud technology, but you have no background, this is a thing that will take you in a very handheld, I guess in English, way to achieving that sort of thing. My point is,
there will be a copy in the office library at some point soon.
I hope so. I will give you this copy to make available to your students. Writing this book was extremely painful because I was juggling my full-time job and 2 small children, but it was really a very gratifying experience. And now that people are starting to work through it and give me feedback, that it's been super helpful. I think the way I would like to take my career to the next step is actually write more books. Not necessarily all about technology, but the interface between science and technology is really interesting, and there's a lot to do there to help people kind of on both sides, because there's a lot of jargon coming at you from both sides. So I think ultimately I want to become a full-time author. Don't tell my boss. This is recorded. But anyway, that's so how am I preparing? Well, I wrote a book, and probably going to look for opportunities to kind of do the next one. We'll see how that goes.
Lindsey, you want to go next?
Yeah, so I'm going to lay it out there. I want to be a director and above title in 10 years. I would say that as an undergrad, I didn't realize how much representation mattered, and seeing professors that I could relate to really made me feel like I could pursue science, because there aren't any scientists in my family, and I was the first one to go to grad school. And we need that for biotech. The numbers are not great in biotech. We do need to diversify the pipeline and really start seeing the drop-off at the management level. And if you don't start in manager positions, you're never going to get to the C-suite. So that's why last year I made the decision that as much as I loved working as an individual contributor scientist, if I really wanted to have that seat at the table where strategies are being made, I needed to look for that next step. And that's why I took on my current role, because I get to develop my people management skills by having a team of 3 people. And I also have leadership that is willing to be a sponsor for me and get me into meetings that otherwise I just would have never been invited to. And now that I have a better understanding of how these decisions are being made, what are the strategies, and providing my voice, I really want to continue to grow in technology, and especially for large molecule and cell and gene therapy space in the next 3 to 5 years. So that way, when I'm thinking about that next step, I know it needs to be a director position, and I know that I'll have really good marketed talent. And I think a lot of times we don't sell ourselves, and that we just think if we work hard, someone will recognize it and will magically be given what we want. And really, it's that combination of having the talent and being able to influence and really be strategic. And I know that if I can be in a position of director and above, I'll be able to even pay it forward that much faster by knowing that I can pull in talent that normally director level people might not think of.
Yeah. So I'll go next. What I mentioned previously is that my dream is to become president of my alma mater, Cal State Dominguez Hills. We need more representation of individuals that look like us. Especially I'm a first generation Mexican American, the first in my family to have even graduated from high school and pursued a college degree and then even a PhD. So I want to be that voice, that representation at that level, and eventually the chancellor, like the main boss of all the Cal State systems, because a lot of these Cal State universities, there's a lot of first generation students, and especially those students who are interested in science, but somehow along the ways, they might either get discouraged or the workload is a little bit tougher on them. We need to make sure that they stay on track. If I would have listened to all those negative words that, came to me, I would have given up a long time ago. But because I'm a very stubborn person, I kept going. And even in grad school, I was told that, but I was like, no, this is what I want to do. So that's why I am inclined to going in that direction. I've been doing a lot of informational interviews, and because of COVID, I kind of stopped because I've been so busy with work, but I want to get more to those, sort of like what Dr. Osei-Sarfo mentioned, that, you contact your network and you start talking to them and just trying to see the ways of the paths that they've taken in order to get to those positions. And then another goal of mine is also to actually sooner than later is publish my book. I've been wanting to write a book, more an inspirational biography about myself, my family, because there's not a lot of us in science that come from Compton or who are Mexican American. Like, I never imagined that I would become a scientist, but yet using my science in so many different ways. And so I want to make sure that students and even like families get inspired that you don't have to be rich to become a scientist. So those are sort of what I want to do.
Okay. Although for the next 10 years, I don't have a specific title in mind, I definitely would like to use some of the experiences that I've gained directing this program and also working with diversity issues at Columbia University to kind of pivot my way more into education policy. So, because I figure a lot of the issues or topics that deal with these smaller programs at different universities, they come from the state or the federal level. So in order to get into that conversation to make STEM more accessible to various groups of people, I figured I would like to move more into that realm, if you will. And I guess if I'm going to say this to you, I have to do it. So I've actually been thinking about going back to school to receive my master's in education policy and social analysis. So actually, as part of my day today, I've been, reviewing some concepts for the GRE. So we'll see how that goes the next month or two. But that's kind of where I see myself going, and kind of what, like Geraldine said, don't tell my bosses.
Okay, you can potentially become Gabby's study buddy, because that's what she's gonna start doing now in the fall. And basically that type of degree. Okay, so our first question comes from Beatriz.
Hi, so you guys kind of answered this already, but I don't mind asking again because I think it's really important. As we all know, there's a big lack of women and people of color in STEM. So I just want you guys to reiterate how have you stayed positive and focused in pursuing your field of choice, knowing that there's a lot of discrepancies in the number of either women or people of color in your field? Also, how have you overcome that lack of representation? And lastly, how do you think you can make an impact in your field so that it can become more inclusive? And also, how can we think about ways that we can make a change as well?
Maybe I'll start. Wow, hopefully I remember all the questions you asked, Beatriz. But one of the things that keeps me going, especially because being a woman of color and have faced so many challenges and, like I said, discouragement by individuals who have told me, well, you don't have the qualities that are needed to be in a PhD program or in the sciences, or I don't think you're that smart. And so what keeps me going is seeing how hard my parents have worked to be able to live here in the US, how they immigrated to provide their future daughter a great opportunity. Luckily, you know, I was born here, and so I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities. But even though I've come across some kind of like stereotypes, I've also, because of those instances, I've developed what's called the imposter syndrome, which I don't know if you know what that means, but feeling like, oh my gosh, do I really belong here? Or doubting yourself because people are planting those sort of thoughts into you. But no, I really knew that I wanted to become someone in life. Why? In order for me to make a greater difference and for my voice to be heard, I said, I want to pursue a scientific career and also want to get a PhD. Like I mentioned, I thought I was going to become a medical doctor because that's what I was exposed to, but having mentors of various disciplines, as well as from different cultures, both male and females, I learned from them. And that kind of gave me also the push that I needed to pursue my career. But I've been always very determined. And when I'm told no, ooh, it's kind of like you lit this fire on me, and I'm like, oh no, well, I'm gonna get this because I really want it. So I go for it, and I surround myself with positive people, and I learn from those instances, failures, challenges, and you just ask and not be afraid of asking for help. Because if you don't ask, sometimes people don't know that you might be in that need. So asking for help, and it's okay to be vulnerable, but you know, it's on you to take that decision and just to go forth. Maybe, like I mentioned, it might not go the way you're thinking, but you're gonna get there. So I hope I answered all the questions.
So just to echo everything Teresa's saying, I just love every minute of it because my dad's Mexican American, and I think for him at the time in the 60s and 70s, it was taught that the only way you can succeed is to assimilate. And I think my fear is, will my daughter not be proud of her identity as a multiracial person? She's Korean American, Mexican American, and Bolivian American. And I highly recommend America Ferrera's TED Talk, that your identity is your superpower. And what really keeps me motivated is to highlight that we do belong in STEM, we do exist, and to be proud of who we are. So I've shared some links. Please check out the rotation programs at Genentech, internships, find me on LinkedIn, and reach out to get that networking. And then for me, what I've been trying to do is be more vocal on who I am as a scientist. And I think what was one of the scary things I did is I participated in a conference, and they always ask us for bio sketches. And this is the first time where I actually put in my D&I work in addition to my science work, because if we don't talk about it, it's, you know, are we going to say that? How can we say we're proud if we're not proud enough to like shout it from the rooftops and be more vocal and highlight all of the positive attributes of who we are and what we bring to science?
I just want to add to the two panelists' statements what they said was amazing. One little piece that I would like to add is like, yes, you know, you want to stay positive, but it's okay to, I don't know, scream or just be negative, because that's the only way, like, you know, you hit a roadblock, you scream, and then you know, I'm going to knock this roadblock out. So it's definitely okay to have your ups and downs. And one thing that definitely got me through my downs is having a strong support system of friends and families, not necessarily in STEM, because you might not have too many folks that look like you, but just having other people that have gone through similar obstacles in different industries or different disciplines can definitely help remotivate you or relight that fire under you to keep you going.
Yeah, you all have articulated those problems really well. I think I'm more on the other side of some of those barriers, and what I see is that in the places that care about diversity, there's changes being made to hiring practices and management practices, and my advice in general would be, don't be shy about applying to jobs, even if you don't hit every point on the checklist, because nobody ever fills like every point on the requirement checklist. There's this particular profile of person who will think I'm qualified for all of this, and the rest of us need to think kind of like, no, I don't check all the boxes, but I'm still going to try. I'm still going to take my shot, and definitely don't be shy about applying. Like the places that are making changes, that are trying to improve conditions, will recognize and value your contributions, even if you don't have everything checked off. So that's my advice. Like apply, try, and you will find a place that will value you as a person, as a contributor.
To quote Dr. Gabby, never self-exclude. Always apply. Okay, we have one more question from Nick, and then unless I get any more questions, we're gonna move to the small group discussions. Nick?
He's unmuted, but we can't hear him.
Yeah.
Yikes, can you guys hear me now?
Now we can.
Cool, hi, sorry about that. I want to first thank everyone for everything you guys said today. I really appreciate it and taking notes. I'm actually a first-year graduate student here in New York City, and I have two major questions. I already know going into my PhD program, I don't necessarily want to stay in academia. That may change in a few years, of course, but for now I know that I kind of want to explore other options. I wanted to know when would be the best time to start looking for biotech internships and whatnot as I rotate through my first year. And as I'm looking for a new lab to go into, what kind of skills would be the best skills to look for in these labs to kind of develop for after finishing my PhD?
So I can take that question. I don't think grad students really realize that you can still apply for biotech internships. The challenge is making it really crystal clear with your thesis advisor that this is something you want to do, you want to go into biotech, and making sure you find an advisor who's going to be supportive. So one, I would say look for advisors who are either interfaced with biotech already, or if a lot of their students have gone into biotech, because then they'll have better understanding of the guidance to give you for going in that door. I would just say a watch out is if you have a professor who their grad students, postdocs have only gone into academia, they're going to have limited experience in how to make sure you have the right project and skill sets that will be competitive when you're ready for that job market. Secondly, at Genentech, at least in research and development, they prefer grad students to undergrads for the internship programs. And we have 3-month internships and 6-month internships. So due to COVID right now, the internships are all virtual this year. So there aren't any people working in the lab right now. But typically the way I've worked with the grad students, and we do a really good job recruiting from the Bay Area schools because a lot of the professors are affiliated with biotech companies, whether it's large pharma or startups. So you just have that agreement that you want to make sure you can get this 3-month time frame to really commit 100% to the internship, and you can start applying. Go onto the website for Genentech to see what internships are available. And then I think some of the other ones, if you're interested in more like data scientists, data analytics, so if you don't need to be in the lab and a lot of the work is done through computers, that can be another option as well. But I would say if you wait until you graduate from your PhD program, it's too late and it'll be harder to find those opportunities. And what you'll be able to apply to is now there's industry postdocs. So people are realizing that academic postdoc isn't really the way to break into biotech necessarily. It's kind of hit and miss. And so a lot of the grad students are also looking at industry postdocs if they have a hard time finding a job. And then startups it depends on skill set. So some startups are fine with you applying right after your PhD. Some startups would want some experience. So those are a couple of the options I would recommend.
And I know that a lot of our students want to stay local. So Genentech is in New York too, a little bit upstate from us. And our panelists from this same panel 2 summers ago, Dr. Marcus Jones is the one that manages or helps manage that program over there. So, okay, unless we have any other questions or unless